And that means I will also say good morning, community college family. For those who don't know me, I am Monty Hickman. I am the Associate Director for Enrollment Management. I have had the pleasure this morning to sit in for Dr. John J.J. Evans. He had some previous engagements he could not miss, and so he asked if I would stand in for him. And so, for those who are new, this is the regularly scheduled community college system student life updates. We usually give updates to our respective areas, and this is JJ's, and so he wanted to make sure you didn't miss this, and so he wanted to ask me to sit in for him and and kind of guide the conversation today. So for those who are new, today's presentation is on the Bill of Rights, the Parents' Bill of Rights, and he wanted to make sure, since that's a hot topic going on right now, he wanted to make sure that he provided you all the opportunity to ask questions, to have updates, and for those who may not have a complete understanding of it, he asked that our general counsel provide those updates to you. So if I go too fast, please stop me, and I'm gonna go through each slide. Let me see, this is not working. Can you all see the slides just to make sure? All right, so for those who are not in the student engagement world, student engagement, student life usually consists of collegiate activities, sports, campus engagement, clubs and organizations, service learning and community engagement, and student leadership and student government. So you can see how the new bill of rights for parents may have a huge impact on the community colleges. So we thought this would be a great time to come and give this update. JJ created these slides, by the way, so you can tell because he have all these happy things today. So you want to say, how are you doing today? Happy Valentine's Day. I don't have a Valentine, so I'm kind of bitter today. So, hey, you're my Valentine. So thank you all. I accept candy, chocolate, money, gift cards, and jewelry. Just to let you know. Also, one of my gifts to you today for Valentine's Day is to allow you to have a conversation with our illustrious General Counsel, Miss Tawana Foster Artist, as I call her, Dr. Foster Artist. She is the General Counsel for the Community College System. She provides a wealth of knowledge. If she doesn't know, she's going to research it for you and get back to you with a concrete answer. So, what we want to do today, though, is JJ sent out a list of questions, or he'll allow you to provide questions for today's session. And so these questions provided Counsel Artist opportunity to do some research to make sure she's able to answer those questions. She also is allowing time at the end for you to ask questions that you may not have sent in. Please just be aware that if you ask a question, she may not be able to answer it on the spot because some things do at times require research. So she's not giving an answer that comes back to bite us in the butt later on. So with that being said, I am now looking at you, Counselor Artist. Happy Valentine's Day, and I will now turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hickman. For anyone who doesn't know, Dr. Hickman is the mayor of the system office, and he walks around and pontificates like most.
I don't do it. Why you doing it? It's Valentine's Day. Really? You gonna do that to me?
So you're the mayor for the call today. How's that?
I am.
I am happy to be here with you all today. Let's see. Happy Valentine's Day. Let's start there. I had the pleasure of getting up super early this morning and doing what lots of working parents do on days like today, which is rush around and try to make sure you've got your kids' Valentines and little treats ready for school. So that is how I started my day. And my 3-year-old is definitely my Valentine. He is the love and light of my life. Don't tell my husband, okay?
I'm going to tell him just because you said the mayor thing.
But let's jump right in. Dr. Evans was kind enough to send me some questions that you all had last night or yesterday afternoon. And I did take a quick look at them last night. I'll be honest with you, I didn't write down answers to everything. We'll walk through some today. And Dr. Hickman, am I able to share my screen some? We might have to go back and forth some, or I
I
can send
can,
to share.
I'll stop sharing now and you can go in and share.
Okay, well, we can go back and forth because we're going to need the questions too. I
Okay.
just want to make sure I had the appropriate permission to share. So question 1 is on the screen already. Can a minor join an LGBTQ student organization without parental consent? What if the student has not come out to their parents? So this is a tough one, and I think Dr. Hickman warmed you up a little bit that I may not be able to answer all your questions. And what I will say about this question, and unfortunately, probably more than this one that you will have today, is that this is a question that your leadership team on your college campus is going to have to answer for you. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The way the Parents' Bill of Rights is structured is there are multiple sections, requirements, depending upon who you are. So let's start there and break down kind of these 3 ideas of who it applies to. First, there are requirements for public school units that apply to any minor registered in a public school unit. So on first glance, that's K to 12, right? So you would think that those things don't necessarily apply to community college campuses. And for the most part, you're right, except for this fact that we have CCP students on campus. And many of your, I would wager 99.9% of your CCP students on your campus are also registered in a public school unit. And that is how they came to you, was through partnership with the public school unit. So the requirements in Parents' Bill of Rights will still apply to the CCP students on your campus, but it is very muddy and murky water here because the community college is not a public school unit. So what I believe will happen is the public school units will come to your college leadership and ask for compliance or reporting, because the public school unit is going to have to comply and report back to the General Assembly. They're going to ask colleges, I believe, to comply as well and help them out with their requirements. And then it is up to your college leadership whether they agree or not to comply in those ways. And so I can't answer that question for you. I think that's going to have to be a question for your leadership. As to the second question about if the student hasn't come out to their parents, that's a tough one. And I know we're going to get to a question about pronouns later as well. But it's another one of those things where it's very muddy. And because you're not a public school unit, it would seem that it wouldn't apply. But again, if you have CCP students, it might apply, and your leadership is going to have to determine how they navigate that. Usually the public school units and the community colleges have a memorandum of understanding, what we call an MOU, that is renewed annually. My advice has been that the leaders of your colleges negotiate their compliance or non-compliance as part of that MOU. So if you have the toolkit that I sent out back in November, you'll see like there's one aspect of that that's proposed language that can be added to an MOU to either state that the ways in which the college will comply or will not comply with the Parents' Bill of Rights. The other areas that I want to touch on briefly, because I think this will help shade where we're going to go with the rest of the questions, is there are also requirements for governing bodies of public school units. So that's mostly Board of Education, state DPI, those kind of organizations. They are requirements for them. Now, there are a set of requirements in particular for community colleges in the Parents' Bill of Rights. And those are the requirements that apply directly to state entities. While community colleges are not state agencies, they are within the definition or the statutory definition of a state entity. Typically, a state entity is defined as any political subdivision of the state, including community colleges. Some of those requirements for state entities, if you'll give me just a moment, I want to go to my list so I'm sure I don't miss any. So the requirements specifically for state entities under Parents' Bill of Rights are that you cannot collect any biometric data, blood, or DNA from a minor without their parents' consent. Some exceptions to this rule include if it's related to a juvenile justice offense or what we would call a crime for if an adult were to commit it. If the biometric scan occurs in a place that's open to the public with no expectation of privacy. Think safety and security scans, metal detectors, that type of thing. Or if it's used for security or surveillance of buildings, grounds, or school transportation only. Usually, I don't think most colleges store this type of data anyway, but if your college decides to create, store, or use it, you should definitely talk to your local legal counsel before doing so. The second area that their requirements for state entities are video and audio recordings of minors. It requires you to have consent before you create any video or voice recording of a child without their parents' prior consent. Again, exceptions if it's part of a court proceeding, part of a child welfare, think abuse, neglect, or dependency cases, juvenile justice, or criminal investigation. Or if the recording is used solely for a safety demonstration related to security or discipline, academic or extracurricular activity, classroom instruction, photo ID card, security or surveillance of buildings, grounds, or school transportation. Also, parents must be notified of criminal offenses, and parents have right to all of the educational records of their minor children. It's interesting because I do think there are some places where the parents' bill of rights, especially where it talks about educational records, may conflict with some of our federal laws, mostly FERPA. Again, that's going to become a local issue for you to discuss with your president, your leadership, and your local legal counsel for how they prefer you to move forward. While we're on question one, a slight deviation from the question would go to health and medical procedures, which are clearly covered under the Parents' Bill of Rights and that do require consent. Let's see, the last question on this slide, we currently do not have a campus process to contact, notify parents or guardians about club involvement. What do you suggest? So this is, again, tough because a lot of it's going to be determined by your local president and your local board of trustees. I know some presidents feel very strongly about protecting minor students' rights and not wanting to share anything without that student's consent, whether the child has come out to their parents or not, or even what extracurricular activities the student is participating in. So I would defer to your local leadership and your local legal counsel to make those decisions for you. If your college decides it is going to comply with some of these requirements that are put upon public school units for the sake of your MOU or for the sake of your CCP enrollment, then I do think it would be very helpful to have some kind of notification process about any club involvement that any of your minor students participate in. We can go to question number 2, Dr. Hickman.
Counsel, quick question though. Would that also include students who are minors who are out of high school, who are enrolled in an institution?
So very interestingly enough, that's that area that's really interesting because what we know is these requirements for public school units apply to minors enrolled in a public school unit. If you have, let's say, a minor who's been homeschooled their whole life, so they're not technically enrolled in a public school unit, they graduated from high school early and came to the community college, then I believe that you are only subject for that particular child to the requirements on state entities. Okay. Now, what's going to be tough would be to determine who's enrolled in a public school all the time and who's not, which is probably why I think most colleges will just, if they're going to comply with any of these requirements, they're going to err on the side of caution and do it for everyone under age 18. Yeah,
okay. Thank you.
No problem. Question number 2, many of our student life organizations have Facebook, TikTok, etc. Do our minors need consent before posting, live streaming, or recording content? I would say they do because of the provision I just talked to you about with the provision related to recording minors. And let me share my screen and I'll see if I can show you directly where that is in the bill. And I'll try to, well, this is not a shortcut, so let me just scroll up. So I think it's closer to the beginning of the bill. On page 4, yes. If we go up one more, to these enumerated rights that I'm highlighting here, a parent has the right to do the following. Number 9, to prohibit the creation by the state of a video or video recording of his or her child without the parent's prior written consent, except a recording made for the following circumstances. And we talked about those exceptions earlier. So I think any recording, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, whatever social media your college is using, would require a parent's consent unless it was related to these things: court proceedings, abuse, neglect, dependency, safety demonstrations, etc. So I think that's the relevant provision for you there. I'll stop sharing now. And Dr. Hickman, if you want to go to question number 3. Okay, our campus invites the local health department to conduct HIV, sexually transmitted disease screenings, pass out condoms, and provide information for local resources. Do we need to restrict these services for minors? I would say that you should. The bill is pretty clear that parents get to consent to medical treatment for their minor children. I think these types of screenings at a minimum could be considered medical services. That's early in the bill. If I go back to where we were previously, I think it's also in this same section. Number 5, to make healthcare decisions for their child. As well, if we go down, I know there's another section on this. Yes, if you look at the bottom of page 5, parents have legal rights with regards to their child's education, including number 1, the right to consent or withhold consent for participation in reproductive health and safety education programs consistent with the requirements in 115C, blah, blah, blah. So I think when it comes to any kind of screenings for sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, and honestly, I would say any kind of health screening at all, I would make sure you have the parent's consent unless you or your leadership determine, and let me not say you, probably your leadership determines that they will not comply with the Parents' Bill of Rights, which I know that some presidents feel very strongly about it and may or may not comply. Question number 4. How do we adhere to the statement below? This is a direct quote from the session law at page 8. Establish a process for parents to learn about the nature and purpose of clubs and school activities offered at their child's school, including both curricular and extracurricular activities. Does the college handbook and having information on the college website satisfy this requirement? So first, this direct quote is not a requirement for community colleges. This is one of those things that falls back into that public school unit bucket. It only becomes a requirement for you if your leadership agrees to comply with the Parents' Bill of Rights and to affirm that compliance to your local public school board, your local LEA, through use of the MOU or some other agreement related to CCP students. So that's the first thing, is technically this is a requirement for public school units. And that's in General Statute 115C 76.35. So the onus is really on the public school unit to provide this. Again, they may ask you for it and your local leadership may agree to provide it. If you want to provide it kind of as a proactive measure, then I do think your college handbook is a great place to talk about all your extracurricular activities, as well as the college website. but this requirement in particular goes to public school units. Question number 5. Is it permissible to address a student by their preferred pronouns outside of their academic record? And then it also references another quote from the session law on page 9 that requires, prior to any changes in the name or pronoun used for a student in school records or by school personnel, notice to the parent must be given. Again, if your leadership determines you will comply with the Parents' Bill of Rights, and you will do so in conjunction with your local public school unit, then I believe you're not allowed any pronoun usage by school personnel under that particular provision in the law. The way that lead-in language for that particular statute goes, it's General Statute 115C 76.45. It puts the onus on the governing body of the public school unit, which would be your school board, Board of Education, maybe even DPI, to adopt procedures to notify a parent upon a number of things, this being one of them, related to pronoun usage. So I'd also encourage you to look at any policies put out by your local school board, as well as DPI related to pronoun usage, because if your leadership determines they will comply with the Parents' Bill of Rights, that is more than likely what you would be following. Question number 6. Our executive leadership team has questions about holding religious services on campus. We have a chapter of Crew as a club on our campus, and they have requested to host an Ash Wednesday service among one other service. It is my understanding that there is no rule against having this type of service as long as the same opportunity is afforded to any other student group or religion, denomination, or non-religious affiliation. So it seems like this question is more so about religious activities on campus, and there is no prohibition against religious activities on campus. The only thing I would point you to is on page 1 of the bill, where it talks about, where it enumerates the Parents' Bill of Rights. The right to direct the upbringing and moral or religious training of his or her child is one of those rights that is enumerated. So I don't think there's any prohibition against holding a religious service or a religious event on campus. I think if you're going to comply with the Parents' Bill of Rights, per the directions of your leadership or your local legal counsel, then you would have to be very mindful about making sure you notify any parents or seek consent from any parents of minor children enrolled in public school units on your campus. Question number 7, Dr. Hickman. With the Parents' Bill of Rights legislation or any other legislation or practices, is there any guidance on how to provide programming that may be more mature in nature on campuses where there's an earlier middle college? We are working on policies and practices for this concern. So I would say that the guidance is being developed right now. I think this is a very new issue for many college campuses, and it's not settled yet and probably won't be settled for a very long time. So what I mean by that is, in those multiple parts of the bill, the parts that apply to public school units, the parts that apply to governing bodies of public school units, there are particular requirements, especially on governing bodies, to create these types of policies, these types of rules, and then to report back to the legislature. I think what will happen is we'll see one iteration of these rules come out probably in the next 12 months, and then we'll see them be refined over time. Probably every year or so, we'll see them refined for the next 3 to 5 years. And that will then become the kind of working guidance for how to do this. The only thing I can tell you right now is you're going to have to lean on your local leadership to make those hard decisions and give you direction on what to do and how to implement that. And then also continue to track your local school boards, continue to track DPI and State Board of Education policies. And they did issue a couple of policies so far that were included in the toolkit, but they are not very prescriptive or detailed yet. I'm also interested to see if the legislature comes back and makes any changes in the law in the short session or in next year's long session. Some of you may know that I worked at the legislature for about 7 years before I accepted the role at the system office. And so one of my jobs was to write bills like this and to present them in committee and do what I'm doing here, some sit in the hot seat and handle questions about particular legislation. And so one of the first things I did when I first saw this bill come out was call one of my old colleagues who I assumed wrote it. And I was correct. It was this particular person who wrote it, and asked them about some of the intention behind it. Because what I know from my time at the General Assembly is sometimes writing legislation can be fast and furious, and it's going through multiple iterations. Like there's one bill that's very well known that I authored a few years ago that I think I went through about 23 iterations of that bill before we got to the final draft. So during that process, there's a lot of conversation happening amongst the legislators. There's a lot of legislative committee meetings, and we're just kind of going through and trying to figure out what the language will be. So I wanted to talk to that person to see where the intention was for this legislation, because sometimes that gets lost and isn't always captured by the end product. And so I wanted to have that conversation. And it sounds like, quite frankly, they didn't really contemplate community colleges or CCP students in this process. I did ask the question if there may be some opportunity to essentially exclude community college students or any college or university student. And what I was told was that it's highly unlikely. I've talked to our government affairs staff here at the system office. Some of you may know Alex Fagg or Lily Rhodes. And asked if they thought that was something they could ask for in short session, what they thought about it. And I think the response has pretty much been it's probably not a good idea to ask for a direct exemption because it may call more attention and create more rules as opposed to less. So I think we won't know where the guidance lands on this until it settles some. I think the other thing is what I said earlier about there are some places where this bill conflicts with federal law. And so I think we're going to have to see where that lands some too, and whether or not the legislature goes back and cleans any of that up in short session or the next long session. So apologies, but I can't answer that. I think that's still going to be a local question. Question number 8. How frequently must a student confirm parents' consent? Once a semester, once a year, per activity, per trip? So the bill doesn't prescribe a timeline. I would guess, and this is only an educated guess, that annually should be sufficient, and the onus would be on the parent if consent were to shift or change to come back to the public school unit or the college or whoever the governing authority is in charge of that particular area and say that they've changed their consent or their opinion about the matter. If you're going to seek that by way of a form or some other document, I would suggest at a minimum annually and with a parent signature. All right, question number 9. Does the law differentiate CCP students from early middle college students? If they are taking 100% of college courses, regardless of age, do we need to alter our programming, content, speakers, workshop, etc.? No, there really is no differentiation. We typically consider CCP students at the system office, we consider it basically college transfer pathways, college career and technical pathways, cooperative innovative high schools, early and middle college, and workforce continuing education pathways. So we don't make any distinction at the system office level for CCP, nor does this legislation really call out CCP at all. The legislation only talks about minor students or minor students enrolled in a public school unit. So no differentiation there, and I'm not sure there's anything you could do that would alter at this point and make it less prescriptive for minors on college campuses.
Counsel, so I know there's been a focus on CCP with a lot of these questions. So the law pretty much applies to, again, CCP students and students who have graduated from high school and are now enrolled in college but are minors.
So the law defines, let me share my screen for a minute. I want to show you some definitions.
Okay. So is it the minor part that's the focus of everything, not what program they're in, but because they're minors?
Correct. So we only talk about CCP. So let me back up. I'm going to show you these definitions and then I'll hopefully flesh it out a little bit more for you. So at the start of the Parents' Bill of Rights, they start with these definitions, and a child being anyone under age 18 who has not been emancipated. And then a parent being a person who has legal custody, including natural, adoptive, and legal guardian. And I want to go to the next set of definitions too. There's another set of definitions that gives a little bit more. Okay. So here we are, public school requirements. So here we talk about who's school personnel. Basically, that's anyone on your campus. Oh no, it still didn't give me. I thought there was one that would give me the school definition.
Okay. But I could be an 18-year-old in CCP or traditional high school, but because I'm not a minor, because I'm 18,
it won't apply.
It won't apply. So it's not really about the CCP program, it's just being a minor.
Well, it is still about CCP though, because part of these requirements, the requirements for public school are, think about what I said at the start, there are 3 sets of requirements. Requirements for public school units that are for minors enrolled in public schools, which are CCP students.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are requirements for governing bodies of public schools, which again will touch your CCP students, because that's usually how they become CCP students, is they're enrolled in another public school unit. Mm-hmm. And then also the state entities. So yes, minors first is the biggest concern, or the biggest umbrella group. And then second, I think you have to consider most of your CCP students are going to be registered in a public school. You might have the rare student, like I said earlier, who, just graduated high school early, was homeschooled, or, involved in some fast track charter school or something else that allowed them to graduate from high school, let's say at 16. And there was also, in last year's legislation, a route for faster high school graduation as well. So it'll be interesting if we see any shift because of Parents' Bill of Rights to local school units preferring that more so than CCP programming. Because they feel like if they get students through the local high school, then they don't have to negotiate with the community college around it. The onus just kind of shifts at that point. So yeah, I think under 18 first, CCP students second, and then any other considerations for minors who are not enrolled in a public school unit. Does that answer your question, Dr. Hicks?
Thank you, it did. Thank you.
Let's see. We're on question number 10. Another quote on page 9 of the session law: at the beginning of each school year, notice of each healthcare service offered at his or her child's school and the means for the parent to provide consent. Would this include blood drives, the health department using our campus as a remote office, or health fairs hosted on campus? So again, this is a requirement that is for the public school unit. And I want to just go look at where that quote came from to make sure. So I believe this is a requirement that talks about the governing body of school units. So these will be, again, those school board of education, DPI changes. And it says they shall adopt procedures to notify a parent of the following. So if there's any health service being offered on that school campus, then yes, the governing body of the public school unit will have to come up with some kind of procedure to notify parents and to seek consent. I think a blood drive would likely count as a healthcare service. And if you have a health department on your campus as a remote office, or you're hosting health fairs, I think the question becomes, are they providing any healthcare service? Are they doing high blood pressure screenings? Are they doing HIV screenings? Are they doing STD testing? If so, I think it's fair to say those are all health services that are being offered on the campus. And again, because this is one of those governing bodies of public school unit requirements, your college leadership is going to have to determine whether or not they comply, and they're likely going to do that in conversation and collaboration with their local public school unit. We don't know how the public school units will handle this yet, and if they will ask colleges to comply. But if they do, then I go back to the MOU is a good place for your leadership to determine and to kind of map out what that will look like. And then everyone on the campus will be responsible for following the leadership's directives. I think that's our last question, Dr. Hickman. So if we want to open up for other questions, happy to answer if I can.
There are no questions right now in the chat. So if you want to, if you have questions, you can either put in the chat or just ask. Oh, someone asked, would you mind sending the MOU language again?
Sure, I can. Do you want me to send it to you, Dr. Hickman, and you can send it out?
Send it to me and Dr. Evans, because this is his group. He has the listserv for it.
Okay. I will do that as soon as we end this call.
Yes, ma'am. There was a hand raised that went down.
If you want, I can share my screen and show it to you, just in case there are any questions about the language. And then it'll follow in an email after we're done with this call. So what you see on your screen now is that language. Make it a little bit bigger for you. I've been accused of having looking at things very small on my screen. And these are just very general, generic paragraphs that colleges can modify in any way they choose. To either say that they're only complying with the state entity requirements, or to say they're also going to require collaborate with public school units in some way, and to be able to spell those things out. Again, I just want to reiterate, talking to your local counsel is also best practice, and encouraging your leaders to also seek local counsel. Okay,
we have a question.
All right.
For public or open events, how would the photo or video restriction be in effect? We have events that are open to students and the campus community, and we have early colleges. My hair just gray. My hair just got gray thinking about this.
All right, so you're talking about public or open event. And what I will do is go to the language in the bill on videos. Because for some of it, you've got those exceptions built in that are safety, security kind of things. That's the memo on that, but I want to get to the language in the bill itself. Okay. So what you're seeing here is the language about video. So recording is part of a court procedure related to Chapter 7B, which is abuse, neglect, dependency, or Chapter 14, which is criminal. Safety demonstration, academic or extracurricular activity, classroom instruction, photo ID card, security, and surveillance. So what I would argue, depending upon what kind of public event you're talking about, is that whatever recording you're doing may be related to an academic activity or an extracurricular activity. And if so, then you have kind of this cutout or this carve out exception that you can use a recording for that. And Dr. Hickman, let me put your question back up because I'm not sure. I'm covering it all. Okay. So I think this was Brian's question. So I think if you can argue and tie it to an academic or extracurricular activity, then you might get that exception there. Another thing you could do, which this makes your event probably way more complicated, would be check ID or set a minimum age to attend an event. Again, those are decisions for your college leadership, though. I can't advise you either way on that. I can just tell you that that's an option. All right, Dr. Hickman, we have another question.
Yes. Just make sure I got the right ones. I didn't miss anything. That was Brian's. If we have any underage students in any clubs, such as associate social justice or even simple as culinary, should we encourage the advisor to be mindful of what he or she says during this meeting to the students, or have a parental consent form?
Marlena, I think that's a very good idea. Just because, again, we don't know where all this is going to land. And it's something that maybe you could do at the start of the school year, start of the semester, whenever your clubs start to meet, would be just a simple training for your faculty advisors that reminds them of the requirements in the Parents' Bill of Rights, that reminds them whatever your leadership has determined about compliance or non-compliance and what they can do and can't do per your leader's instructions. And then also having that consent form for minor students to participate in your clubs or activities may prevent a parent from later saying, I didn't know or I didn't understand my child was doing this or being exposed to this.
Good point. I may have missed this, but will colleges be required to submit annual reports disclosing their positions on complying with this bill? And will they have audits based off of whistleblower information?
Okay. No, there's nothing in the Parents' Bill of Rights right now that requires colleges to submit any annual reports. There are some reporting requirements for public school units and governing bodies of public school units, but none specifically for colleges within the Parents' Bill of Rights. I don't know whether or not you'll have audits based off whistleblower information. I think that's yet to be determined. And I think it probably will also be determined by if there's litigation about this at some point, if a parent were to sue a college related to some type of what they would allege would be a violation of the Parents' Bill of Rights. And I'm not sure what you mean by whistleblower information. Maybe what you mean is someone alleges that a college is not complying with the Parents' Bill of Rights. You can confirm if that's what you mean or not. Okay. So yeah, so if, let's say, I guess someone just calls in and says, hey, college X is calling my child by pronouns that I don't agree with and that I was unaware of. The first question would be, who would they call? I think they've got a couple of options. They may call the legislature, who then may take some further legislative action. They may call the state auditor's office, which is the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline for the state. Normally, if there are reports made about colleges to the state auditor's office, they normally notify me or someone within the system office, at which point we would notify the college and try to help mediate some solution. The only other place I could think that someone would report it would be to the college itself or to the Board of Education or maybe the county commissioners. And then, that would go through its normal course of probably grievance with those bodies. I think the tough thing about this to think about for colleges is you've got state support and you've got local support. And because this is legislation coming from the General Assembly and our budget also comes from the General Assembly, I think the leaders are going to have to think about how to thread that needle to not, I guess, have to
You have
answer.
money on your Cash App?
Dr. Hickman,
Say what?
I think was that for us?
I think Brian was saying.
Well, let me finish this thought and then I'll circle
I'm
back.
sorry, I was talking, but I was on mute. I apologize. I was
Okay.
just saying that Brian was giving a point of clarification to his last question. I think he was saying it will be an extracurricular in nature, I think, such as Welcome Week or Fall Festival. So I think they're asking if they have these community events that are for the whole college, sometimes for the community, are they required to now get consent forms for every minor student that attends those events?
I think that's up to your local leaders. I think to Brian's question, what I would say is that training for your student leaders is going to be key. And I think you've got that cut out and carve out for extracurricular activity. So as long as you can make the argument it's an extracurricular activity and there's nothing inappropriate happening at that activity, then I think you can leverage the exception in the law. But again, question and decision for your local leaders. I want to go back to this question about the whistleblower information for a minute and make sure we close the loop on that. We were talking about state support and local support. And so much of whether or not you comply and your leader's decision about compliance is also going to take that into consideration. That if your local county commissioners are very supportive of the Parents' Bill of Rights, then you may find yourself in a situation of complying and having that partnership and collaboration with the public school units for that. Okay, I think I've covered Brian's question.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have no more so far. That's it.
All right.
Let's see.
Let's see,
Did one come in?
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just pointing out about the exception that you talked about for the videos of academic and extracurricular activities. We had a situation on our campus where we had a video taken in our nursing simulation center that involved minor students, which is perfectly acceptable under the law. But then the nursing program wanted to take those videos and use them for marketing purposes on our website. And we didn't allow that to happen, but my point is just notice that word solely for the use of videos. You can fall under that exception. Just make sure you are limiting the use of that video or audio tape for that purpose.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sullivan. I agree that's an important distinction, and I'm highlighting that on the screen for you all here. And so I think that's a good point for marketing, for website, for any other promotions, for sponsorship activities related to your foundation. It's not, I won't say that you couldn't use the video, but at that point, you would definitely need to go get the parent, any minor person who appeared in the videos, parental consent before using it for those purposes. And you can see David is referring to 9C, when the recording it will be used solely for any of the following purposes. And number 2, an academic or extracurricular activity is the one we were discussing.
And wouldn't it be a good practice to err on the side of caution, though, to get consent, even for those who aren't minors? Because usually, based on FERPA, you can't really show videos of people anyway, so.
If you're going to use it for marketing purposes, well, that's marketing, sponsorship, website, those types of things, I would get consent from everybody who appeared, just to be on the safe side. But if we're talking only Parents' Bill of Rights, then I think minors are the only people contemplated within this. And to Mr. Sullivan's point about the nursing videos or simulation, that I want to point out 9C3 classroom instruction.
All right. I think that is everything. I'm going to the PowerPoint presentation just to make sure. I think that is all the questions that we have. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right. If not, I will give you back 10 minutes of your Valentine's Day. Counselor, thank you. We really appreciate your time, your expertise. We may call you back for other things if things come up, because we do value you and we enjoy having you talk to us. And so with that being said, everyone have a wonderful day and thank you. I am going to go ahead and stop recording in case there's conversation that needs to be had now. So I have just stopped